History remembers the headlines. We find the bytes. This is the Unsung. The iconic image of us Marines raising the flag on Iwo Jima is one of the most famous photographs of World War II. It symbolizes courage, sacrifice, and victory. But what that photo does unshow is the invisible network of communication that made the capture of that brutal island possible. While the world saw Marines, machines, and might, the true key to victory was a code the enemy could not break, a code built not on mathematics, but on a language that had existed in North America for centuries. This is the story of the men who were there, transmitting those crucial messages. The Navajo Code Talkers. They were the secret weapon the Marines didn't know they needed, and a story that was deliberately kept silent for over 20 years. To understand their erasure, you must first understand who they were. In 1942, the U.S. Marine Corps was in a desperate situation. In the Pacific Theater, Japanese intelligence officers were masters of interception, cracking every code the Americans threw at them. Allied plans were compromised, and lives were being lost at an alarming rate. The military needed a new kind of code, one that was unbreakable and fast. The solution came not from a government think tank or a university cryptography department, but from a civil engineer named Philip Johnston. Johnston was the son of a missionary and had spent much of his childhood on a Navajo reservation. He was one of the few non-Navajo people who spoke the language, and he understood its unique power. The Navajo language, or Dine Bizard, is exceptionally complex. It's tonal, meaning the pitch of a word can change its meaning entirely. Its grammar and syntax are radically different from English or any European language. Most importantly, at the time, it was an unwritten language, existing only in the minds and voices of its speakers. It was utterly foreign to Japanese linguists and cryptographers, who had proven adept at deciphering even the most complex machine-based codes. Johnston pitched his radical idea to the Marines, used the Navajo language as a battlefield code. After a successful demonstration, the military leadership, though initially skeptical, gave the green light. They started with an initial recruitment of just 29 Navajo men. These first recruits were not seasoned soldiers. Many were teenagers. And here lies a painful irony. Many of them had been forced into government-run boarding schools designed to assimilate them into white American culture. In these schools, they were often severely punished for speaking their native tongue. It was a policy of cultural erasure. Now, the very institution that tried to silence their language was begging them to use it to save American lives. These young men, who had been told their heritage was a weakness, were now being asked to turn it into the nation's greatest strength. Their specific, pivotal contribution was the creation and deployment of a brilliant double encryption system using their language. This wasn't just about speaking Navajo over the radio. It was a sophisticated, multi-layered code. The first layer was the alphabet. The code talkers assigned specific Navajo words to each letter of the English alphabet. For example, the letter A became the Navajo word for ant, which is what. B was shush, the word for bear. C was mosey, the word for cat. This way, they could spell out any English word that wasn't already in their specialized vocabulary. The second layer was that vocabulary. For common military terms that needed to be transmitted instantly, they developed a lexicon of direct, often poetic, translations. These weren't literal translations, but descriptive metaphors that would be meaningless to an outsider. A fighter plane, quick and agile, became Dahiti High, the Navajo word for hummingbird. A battleship, massive and grey in the water, became Loso, the word for whale. A submarine was Beshlo, or iron fish. Bombs were Athochi, or eggs. A grenade became Inaimasi, the word for potato, and a commanding officer was known as Atakai, or war chief. This creative vocabulary allowed them to communicate complex military concepts with incredible speed and accuracy. And that leads to the third, and perhaps most crucial element, speed. In the heat of battle, time is the difference between life and death. The existing encryption machines of the era, while sophisticated, were slow and cumbersome. It could take a team of cryptographers up to 30 minutes to encode, transmit, and then decode a single, short message. A Navajo Code Talker, on the other hand, could perform that entire process in just 20 seconds. Imagine the tactical advantage. While the enemy was still trying to set up their decoding equipment, the Marines were already receiving and acting on real-time intelligence. This system was put to the ultimate test during some of the bloodiest campaigns in the Pacific. At the Battle of Iwo Jima, one of the most brutal fights of the war, 6 Navajo Code Talkers worked around the clock for the first 48 hours of the invasion. From their positions on the beach and in foxholes, under constant fire, they transmitted over 800 error-free messages. They coordinated artillery strikes on enemy positions, directed troop movements, called for reinforcements, and guided medical evacuations. Their work was flawless. Major Howard Connor, the signal officer for the 5th Marine Division at Iwo Jima, didn't mince words about their impact. He stated flatly, "Were it not for the Navajos, the Marines would never have taken Iwo Jima. The code was never broken." So, given this incredible success and their undeniable impact on the war effort, how were these war heroes so completely forgotten for decades? Why did their story disappear? The answer lies in a combination of deliberate military secrecy and ingrained cultural prejudice. First and foremost, the code was a state secret. The Code Talker program was classified as top secret, and it remained so until 1968, 23 years after the war ended. The military brass believed the code was such a valuable asset that it might be needed again in future conflicts, like the Korean War or in Vietnam. The Code Talkers themselves were ordered, under threat of penalty, never to speak of their work. They couldn't tell their wives, their parents, their children, or their friends. They went to war, performed extraordinary acts of service, and returned home, bound to silence. Their service was literally erased from the public record and from their own family histories. Second, their story didn't fit the popular post-war narrative. The histories written in the years after 1945 focused on the great man theory of war, the brilliant generals like MacArthur and Eisenhower, the powerful politicians like Roosevelt and Churchill, and the technological marvels like the aircraft carrier and the atomic bomb. The idea that a crucial element of the American victory was owed to a small group of indigenous men using their ancient language simply did unfit the preferred narrative of American industrial and strategic genius. It was easier and more convenient to highlight the machines and the generals than the marginalized men who made communication possible. Finally, and perhaps most painfully, was the systemic discrimination they faced upon returning home. They had fought for freedom abroad, only to be denied basic rights in their own country. Many returned to Arizona and New Mexico, states where they still faced segregation and prejudice. In Arizona, for example, Native Americans were not even granted the right to vote until 1948, 3 years after the war they helped win had ended. They were heroes on the battlefield but were treated as second-class citizens in peacetime. Their story was an uncomfortable paradox for a nation celebrating its global triumph over tyranny. Acknowledging their contribution would have meant acknowledging the hypocrisy of how America treated its own people. It was easier to just keep them in the shadows. The long process of correcting this historical injustice began slowly. In 1968, with the program finally declassified, the story started to trickle out, but real recognition took much longer. In 1982, President Ronald Reagan declared August 14th as National Navajo Code Talkers Day, a symbolic but important gesture. The most significant honor came in 2001, when the original 29 recruits were awarded the Congressional Gold Medal, the nation's highest civilian honor. Subsequent Code Talkers received the Silver Medal. For the few surviving members, it was a recognition that was decades overdue. The legacy of the Navajo Code Talkers is twofold. On one hand, it's a masterclass in adaptive, creative, human-centric problem-solving. It demonstrated that sometimes the most powerful technology isn't a machine, but a living culture. It's a reminder that ingenuity can come from the most unexpected places. On the other hand, their story is a stark and powerful lesson in how prejudice and systemic bias can bury essential truths. The very people a society marginalizes can be the ones who possess the unique skills to save it. They proved that cultural heritage isn't just a relic of the past, but a living, powerful asset. The Navajo Code Talkers were the unsung heroes whose voices secured a victory. Their language, once a source of shame in the eyes of the government, became an unbreakable shield. What other languages or forms of cultural knowledge have been used as unsung strategic assets throughout history? We'd love to read your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks for watching. If you want to uncover more stories of forgotten heroes, make sure to subscribe to the Unsung.